then if I can just ask Lara, if I can just remind you to do the honors with recording the lecture. So we'll make a start. So put your thumbs up if you can all hear me, and you can all see a screen which says Puglia, the pearl of the Mediterranean.
Nope.
No screen.
No screen. Who can see the screen? Can anybody see the screen? Some people can see the screen.
Yeah. It's fine, Damien, for us.
Nope.
I think it might be a little adjustment on one of your settings somewhere. What can I do? I don't know what I can do to help.
Damien, it might mean that they need to turn their video off. It takes a lot of broadband.
Yes, that might be it actually. Yes, if you stop your video, exactly. That's the thing, particularly at this time of night, actually, or afternoon if you're in the US.
Yeah, more likely it's the setting of they need to put on speaker view.
Ah, right. Did you hear that, everybody? If you find speaker view, set it to, I don't, Peter, do you know where that setting is?
It's top right, all the way up right.
Yeah, top right.
If you have an iPad, it's on the left-hand side.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a PC.
But if you see it up on the top right, you'll see Damien and you'll see the screen at the same time. I hope.
Yeah. Are we all fixed? Is anybody still having problems? We good to go?
Yep.
All right, jolly good. We'll head off. Right. So I've titled my talk this evening, Puglia, the Pearl of the Mediterranean. Again, as usual, I think the title will become evident as we go through the talk. So let's start off with a map, as we usually do. So Puglia, from the top left-hand corner to the bottom right-hand corner, is 358 kilometers. That's 222 miles, or if you are in the UK, it's the same distance as from London to Llandudno in Wales. It has a longer coastline than any other mainland Italian region. So Sicily and Sardinia have a longer coastline, but that's because they're islands. Puglia has the longest mainland coast. It's also among the hottest and the driest of all Italy's regions. And it's home to two national parks. One here called the Gargano, which is in the talon of the heel. And the other one here is the Altamura, that we'll talk about a little bit later on. But apart from these two parks, the rest of the region is essentially flat. This means that although it's actually quite a big region, getting around is not too difficult. And so, for example, excuse me, compared to Calabria, where we were last week, although Puglia is much larger in scale, in terms of actually the time that you spend getting between places, it's actually all a bit more concertinaed together. Most of Puglia is limestone. We see this particularly in the Gargano National Park. Also in the Altamura, there are some fabulous gorges there, in particular Gravina, and also in the beautiful buildings, churches in particular, in places like Lecce. The largest city in Puglia is Bari, with a population of about 350,000. It's bordered to the east by the Adriatic, to the southeast down here by the Ionian Sea, and here in the south is the Gulf of Taranto. Now, let's do as we usually do. Let's work vaguely chronologically, although I'm not going to adhere strictly to that this evening. So the Greeks had a name for the region of Puglia, and they called it Iapygia. But although they had a name for it, they didn't really settle here. The people that settled here, rather, were from the region of Illyria, which is modern-day Albania, and they were called the Messapians. Now, I'm not going to talk much about them. I don't actually know a great deal about them. Archaeologists do know about them, but they're not terribly significant for in terms of visitor attractions, if you like, in Puglia. But I mention them because if you're traveling around Puglia, you might well come across this name, and just to give you some kind of reference as to where they come from and what it refers to. So the modern name Puglia itself is actually derived from the ancient Greek name. If you look down here at the bottom, I've put the derivation. So the Greek name was Ipagia, that became Iapygia, Apudia, and eventually Puglia. Puglia, of course, is the Italian name for the region. In England, at least, we very often call it Apulia. That's fine. The two are used interchangeably. Nowadays, I think Puglia is equally well known, but it's up to you how you want to call it. So we're going to leave sort of prehistoric, protohistoric times and jump straight to the Romans. And although there is little to see of it today, the famous event that happened in Puglia during Roman times was, of course, the Battle of Kanye, which occurred during the Second Punic War and was fought between Hannibal, leading, of course, the Carthaginians, and a much larger Roman army. The battle was fought just here, just inland, slightly from the modern city of Barletta. It was on the 2nd of August in 216 BC. Why was it significant? Well, it resulted in a victory for Hannibal, despite him having a vastly inferior forces compared to the Romans. So it's regarded as one of the great tactical victories in military history. But today, unfortunately, there's little to see. I mean, it really was just a battlefield. There's no temples, there's no baths or a city. There's nothing really to see at all. But it's something that you'll come across in guidebooks and so forth. So that's where it is. The other important point to note about Roman times in Puglia were the roads. You'll no doubt have heard of the Via Appia, the Roman road that heads south from Rome. Well, during the beginning of the 3rd century BC, that was extended down past the modern city of Matera to the port of Taranto. And this gave the Romans a port on the sea of the Gulf of Taranto. And then about 40 years later, it was further extended to Brindisi, giving them also a port on the Adriatic Sea. And of course, this was very important because this was the port that they needed to get across to modern-day Durrës in present-day Albania, which was the beginning of the Via Egnatia. And that road went through Macedonia and eventually all the way to Constantinople. This became particularly important, of course, once the city of Constantinople was established as the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. And so there was a road that effectively went all the way from Rome to Constantinople. And it passed through this southern part of Puglia. And this, I think, is one of the reasons for the great richness of the area in latter day times. And certainly the Romans would have also made use of this road to transport grain, olives and wine back up to Rome. After the fall of the Roman Empire then, the main influences in the region of Puglia were the Lombards and then subsequently the Byzantines. Not going to talk terribly much about them, except to say that there is a big Greek influence in Puglia. The Greek influence, as you probably be able to guess now, does not come from sort of 5th, 8th century BC Greek settlements, as in Sicily or in Calabria. It comes in movements to Puglia during the 4th, 5th, and up to the 9th, 10th centuries AD, from what is now modern day Greece and beyond. Just very, very quickly, just to mention, there was a short-lived Islamic state in the city of Bari between 847 and 871, so just 25 years really, but it was quite a significant event, and historians still talk about it. You'll find mention to that in history books. But the really important event, I suppose, for Puglia was the arrival of the Normans. I'm going to spend a few moments talking about these Normans. Just before I do, just to wind the clock back a little bit, in 1035, the 3 eldest sons of Tancred of Hauteville arrived in Aversa near Naples. These 3 brothers were the 3 elder brothers of 2 gentlemen by the name of Robert Guiscard and Roger Bosso. Now, Robert Guiscard and Roger Bosso were the 2 Norman knights who were to conquer Sicily in 1060. So their brothers got here first in 1035, and they were the ones that got a foothold in southern Italy. Now, so where does that get us? Well, I think I mentioned probably in one of my earlier lectures that the Normans were surprisingly devout. They made pilgrimages to the Holy Land, to Jerusalem. And how did they get there? Well, they traveled down through the peninsula of Italy to the port of Brindisi, and there they sailed off to Jerusalem. So they would have known Puglia. Why they were making those pilgrimages? Well, partly, of course, it was for devotion. One could also be a little bit cynical and suspect that they were actually, well, we know they were hiring themselves out as mercenaries in Jerusalem itself. And some of them even had eyes, if you like, on the prize of Jerusalem. So there's no doubt about it that these Normans were traveling down through Puglia throughout the 11th century. But there's one other significant fact in all of that, and this is the sanctuary of St. Michael in the Gargano. And it's found up in the mountains here in a little village called Monte Sant'Angelo. In other words, the mountain of the Saint Angel, if you like, St. Michael, the Archangel. That's what it refers to. So what's the significance of this? Well, in late medieval Christianity, St. Michael became the patron saint of chivalry, and along with that, of course, the patron saint of knights. He was also the patron saint of the Holy Roman Empire. But moreover, he had a special significance for the Normans. Just going aside for the moment, let's remind ourselves of an apparition of St. Michael who appeared to a bishop, Bishop St. Aubert in Avranches in Normandy in 708, instructing the bishop to build a church on a rocky outcrop just off the coast of Normandy. In 960, the Duke of Normandy commissioned a Benedictine abbey on that mount. That was to be the Church of St. Michael on the Mount, that very, very famous church in Normandy. So it's evident, isn't it, that St. Michael held a very important place for these Normans. But it so happens that the most important sanctuary in the whole of Western Europe to St. Michael was this one in the Gargano here at Monte Sant'Angelo. Why? Well, it was one of the very early ones. It was an apparition of St. Michael back in the year 490 AD, when the Archangel Michael appeared above a cave in the Gargano and instructed probably some hermits to build a church there. So it's absolutely certain, I think, that the Norman knights, and almost certainly among them the brothers Robert Guiscard and Roger Bosso, the ones who went on to conquer Sicily, would have come to pay some sort of pilgrimage to this sanctuary of St. Michael in the Gargano. So a very important place, really. The Gargano itself is, as I said, a national park. It's covered by the last remains, in Italy at least, of the ancient forest, the Foresta Umbra, we call it, which once covered much of Central Europe. And the very last remains are here in Puglia. It's a deciduous forest with a predominance of oak and beech, and in the spring it's a beautiful place to see orchids and other wild flowers. The main town in the Gargano is Vieste, here on the easternmost promontory. It's a very pretty town. It sits on this slab of limestone, and as you can just notice from this photograph, there are some quite spectacular sea caves here. One of the lovely things to do in Vieste is to get on a boat and go and visit these sea caves. I'm going to leave the Gargano now and head south a little bit, down towards Bari. But before we get there, I'm going to stop off for a moment at Trani. Trani is a very handsome town, not very big, but plenty of things to see and to detain you for at least half a day. The cathedral in Trani dates from the 12th century. Its plan is a basilica shape, but it is absolutely enormous. It's far higher than any church that you'll come across in Calabria, Sicily, or anywhere else in southern Italy. Notice the rounded arches, the Romanesque architecture, very typical of Puglia, quite different to those kind of things that we've seen, for example, in Sicily of this time with the pointed arches. A point of interest also, certainly to those of us who are very fond of Sicily, is the door to the cathedral was made by an artist in the 13th century by the name, it was cast from bronze, by an artist of the name Barisano of Trani. And why is that significant? He is the same artist that created the door in Monreale Cathedral, the door in the north aisle. So it's the door that you go in through as you visit Monreale Cathedral. And in fact, there are many similarities in the design. Some beautiful figures. This particular figure is showing, of course, St. George on horseback slaying the dragon. But look at this lovely border around the edge. And this is very similar to the kind of thing we see in Monreale. There's also a lovely castle in Trani. This was built by Frederick II, and we're going to talk more about Frederick II in a moment. And just before I leave Trani, an interesting curiosity, certainly for those of you who like tango music, you'll certainly know of the music of Astor Piazzolla? Well, Astor Piazzolla's grandparents came from Trani before they emigrated to Argentina. I'm going to move inland a little bit now from Trani, just above Barletta, into the Altamura, the other national park, also known as the Murgia or Murge. And this is just about the highest part of Puglia. Not terribly high. It's only about, I think the highest part is something like 550 meters above sea level. But nevertheless, on the top of this is built a very fine castle called the Castel del Monte, the Castle of the Mountain, for obvious reasons. Now, the castle was built in the 1240s by Frederick II. We mentioned Frederick II a moment ago, but let's just remind us who he was and why he was significant. His mother was the daughter of Roger II of Sicily. His father was the son of Frederick Barbarossa, the Holy Roman Emperor. So Frederick II's two grandfathers on different sides of the family were perhaps the two most powerful men in Europe of their time, Roger II and Frederick Barbarossa. Frederick II was himself king of Sicily. He inherited much of the Holy Roman Empire, and with it, of course, a large part of Italy, Germany, and so forth. He was known as the Stupor Mundi. He was a polyglot. He spoke multiple languages, as well as, of course, Italian and German and Latin. We know that he spoke French. He also spoke Greek, and he also spoke Arabic. He was a genius mathematician, and he was also a very keen falconer. He wrote the first treatise on falconry that we have. But the Castel del Monte is a curious building, really. It's not a huge building. There's no moat around the outside. There's no bailey around the outside. It's essentially just a keep, and not terribly large at that. So it certainly never held a garrison. It wasn't a fortress or anything of that. Probably there were never any great battles staged here, least of all sieges or something like that. So why the interest? Well, the ground plan of the castle is particularly curious. Put a little diagram of the ground plan here, and you'll see it's completely octagonal. And on each point of the octagon, there is a further octagonal turret. And furthermore, the courtyard, although you can't see that from the photograph, but there is in the middle of it a courtyard, which is itself also octagonal. So why this predominance of octagonal symmetry? Well, we don't really know, but some people have suggested it's possibly an Eastern influence. Other people have suggested it has some sort of mystical connotations. But I think one very plausible reason actually is that it in some way imitates the famous octagonal crown of Charlemagne, or perhaps the octagonal plan of the Carolingian or the Palatine Chapel at Aachen, where Charlemagne is buried. So a curious architectural feature, really, and a very interesting castle to visit. There's some superb exhibits inside it. Around the castle of Castel del Monte is, as I said, the region of Altamura. As I said, it's also called the Murgia. The name is thought to derive from the Latin word murex. And those of you who were with me for my lecture on the Carthaginians, you'll know that I told you that murex was the name of a mussel, I mean the mussel shell, but it's also the name in this case of the kind of stone, quite possibly because limestone, of course, is made up of shells. So anyway, that's a curious and interesting point. The area of the Altamura in Roman times, just going back a bit, was important for what we call transhumance or transhumanza, as it's called in Italian, which simply describes the twice yearly migration of sheep and cows from lowlands to highlands. The word transhumanza simply means transhumus, which means across the ground. That's all it means. The main town in the Altamura is a town of the same name, Altamura, and you can see it has a very handsome church made from this fine stone, this murex limestone that I was just telling you about. Going to leave the Altamura now and go back down to the coast to Bari. Not going to talk terribly much about Bari, but I do want to mention the famous saint connected to Bari, particularly at Christmas time. He's particularly relevant. That is, of course, St. Nicholas of Bari. However, Bari was never the place where St. Nicholas visited or lived. Little is known of historical St. Nicholas, except that he lived on the Lycian shores of modern-day Turkey. So that's somewhere near Dalaman, if any of you have been there. Between the 3rd and the 4th century AD. And he was the bishop of a town called Myra, which is now the modern-day Demre. He is said to have attended the first council of Nicaea, and after he died, he was buried in a church at Myra, which still exists, and you can still visit it today. However, so what's all this got to do with Bari? Well, in 1087, the town of Myra was under attack by the Seljuk Turks, and it happened that there were some merchants from Bari passing by. They removed his remains and brought them to the cathedral here in Bari. In fact, the cathedral was built up to protect the remains of this saint. And this is where they've remained to this day. So he's very often known as St. Nicholas of Bari, even though he actually came from Turkey. I've put this picture here of him. This is not from Bari. This is not from Italy at all. This is actually, I think it's a picture from Czech Republic. But just to show you how St. Nicholas is represented in Christian iconography, he's very often got a beard. But the way that you can identify him is that he has these 3 crosses on his stole. That is what identifies him as a bishop. So what's his connection with Father Christmas? Well, it stems from his reputation of anonymous gift giving throughout his life. Moving on now, I want to move on to this area here. This area here is known as the Valle di Litria or Valle d'Itria, so named probably because back in the 9th century, probably some Greek monks following the cult of what was known as the Madonna Oddigitria settled here. Now, if you don't know about Madonna Oddigitria, you'll be forgiven, but it's something that's very important in Italy. The Madonna Oddigitria is usually it's a painting, or it could be a statue of the Madonna holding Christ as a child, and she's pointing to him. So it's a painting or a statue in which the Madonna is showing the way. So the Madonna Oddigitria. And that's what gives its name to this valley, but probably only because some monks happen to come and live here. In fact, it's not really a valley at all. It's completely flat, but it's just a district. That's what it's called. It's particularly famous for olive groves, also vineyards, but also some beautiful little towns. So Alberobello, Locorotondo, Cisternino, Ostuni, and Martina Franca. They're all very close to one another. Not much more than 10 kilometers separates one from another. So you can almost visit them all in a day, although really they probably merit a couple of days visiting them. The most famous one, I think, of course, is Alberobello, because that is the town of the Trulli. Trulli are these houses here, and in Alberobello there are literally thousands of them. You'll notice how they are. They're essentially a circular dry stone hut with a conical roof, looking very much like hobbit houses. The word trullo, so trulli is plural, trullo is singular. Trullo derives from the Greek word trullos, which just means a dome. And that's exactly what the roof is. And as you wander around, you'll see all manner of these different trulli. Some of them a little bit more dilapidated. Others of them have been done up. Many of them have been turned into shops. Some of them are guest houses. You can stay in them, bed and breakfasts, and so on. And some of them have these curious symbols painted on the roof. You'll notice here. You'll also notice that the pinnacle of the roof is different in each case. And as you walk around, people will stop you and they'll tell you about all of this. And it's all very curious, and it all has a very important meaning. So some of the symbols are symbols of the planets, others of them are Christian symbols, others of them are pagan symbols, and so forth. But it all adds to the interest and makes a visit to the Trulli a lot of fun. As to why they were built like this, well, the story is that they were easily disassembled if a tax collector threatened to visit the area. People could dismantle their houses and pretend, of course, they didn't have a house. And then when the tax collector went away, they could just put the house back together. Possibly apocryphal, but a nice story nonetheless. The other towns, Locorotondo, very, very pretty, handsome architecture, fabulous basilica churches again. Martina Franca, beautiful Baroque decorations. Cisternino, lots of beautiful little atriums with plants adorning them. And you'll notice that the predominant color that pervades all of this area is white. Why? Well, it was said that it helped to protect them from the plague in the 15th and 16th century. Whether or not that was true, we don't know, but it can't have done any harm, and it certainly looked very pretty. This town here is Ostuni, probably the most famous of all of the towns. Its name derives from the Greek astineon, which comes from two words, asti and neon. Asti meaning town and neon meaning new. So the new town. It gives away a little bit its history. Apparently, reputedly, the town that stood here previously was completely razed to the ground by Hannibal when he passed through, and this new town was built up. But it's a very beautiful town indeed, and you can very easily spend a very happy day wandering around it. It was very much in eminence during the Renaissance times, some beautiful doorways, beautiful churches, and so forth. Okay, I want now to move on to the last region of Puglia, which is the heel of the boot, the heel of Italy, if you like, and this is known as Salento. Now, geographically, it's basically a line straight across here. So including sort of Taranto southwards and Ostuni southwards. But interestingly, linguistically and culturally, Taranto is excluded. So actually the line is more something like this. Why? Well, the people of the Salento have a very particular dialect and also a very particular accent. And curiously, it's very similar to the dialect and the accent of Sicily. Sicilians can understand the people of Salento when they're talking in dialect. And of course, the reason for this is their common Greek origin. But today, I mean, even if they're not speaking dialect, they're just speaking their own accent. Somebody from Lecce, if they go to visit Milan, they will very often tell how they are mistaken for being Sicilian because the cadence of their voice, it has very much the same cadence as Sicilian. Certainly true that there are still some villages south of Lecce where they still speak the dialect. The dialect is known as Greco, not surprisingly, deriving from Greek. And as I say, there are several villages where this is still spoken, as well as also a few villages where the names very obviously belie their Greek origins. So, without any doubt, the finest city of the Salento is Lecce, and it is an utterly extraordinary city, quite stunningly beautiful. I think absolutely undeniably so. It's so much so that it is very often nicknamed the Florence of the South. It was conquered by the Romans in the 3rd century. Quite why it became so wealthy, so opulent, I have to admit I've never found really a very satisfactory answer. I mean, it must have been so rich to produce sculpture and artwork as this, possibly just from exports of wine and grain and oil and so forth. And it's also true that the stone of Lecce is also exported. The stone has a very important property. It's limestone, like all the stone in Puglia. When it's first cut, it's very soft to work, but over the course of years, it hardens, so it doesn't weather so much. And you do get these incredible Baroque facades on some of the churches, in particular this one here, the Basilica of Santa Croce. This here is the cathedral, and this is the Cathedral Square. I've got a little video. I don't think it quite does justice to it, but I'll try it nonetheless, give you some idea of what it's like to stand there and look around. So here we go. There we go. So that's really a vast cathedral square. And the other thing that you'll notice, there's not many people around there, which makes Lecce such a beautiful place to visit. A long way from the crowds of, for example, Rome and Florence and so forth, but just as much to see, I think. I mentioned that the Romans conquered it. There is still to be seen the remains of a Roman theatre, as there is a Roman amphitheatre in another one of the city's squares. Unfortunately, though, I didn't have photographs of those. So just to round off a few of the other cities or towns of the Salento, I think we should mention Ottaranto in particular. So Ottaranto is down here on the coast. And Ottaranto was also another port town. In fact, this is the very closest port to Albania, this one here. And in Ottaranto, on the floor of the church, the mother church, the main church, is this utterly stunning mosaic. Not perhaps so much for the craftsmanship. I mean, you can see that it doesn't certainly match the craftsmanship of the mosaics of, for example, the ones of the Hagia Sophia, or least of all, the Palatine Chapel. or the ones of the Villa Romana. It dates from the 13th century. It's, as I say, a little bit crude in workmanship, but it's fantastic to look at. It has kings and queens and emperors. It depicts the seasons. It has mythical beasts, and it covers the entire floor of the cathedral. And no photograph can possibly do it justice. The only way you can possibly admire it is to go there yourself and just look at it. And I can promise you, you will be there for at least an hour, just astonished by this beautiful mosaic. Otherwise, Ottaranto is a very pretty town, very, very lovely town. Some nice restaurants, somebody reminded me this morning, and also a nice little Byzantine church as well. Again, I'm afraid with some lovely frescoes there. I'm afraid I didn't have photographs of those. Two other towns, Galatina, again with some splendid Baroque architecture, and Gallipoli, another port town here. So just to show you where these are, Gallipoli is on the Gulf of Taranto, and Galatina is just up the road here. Gallipoli, some of you have probably spotted, it's the same name as Gallipoli in the Dardanelles of Turkey. Quite right. The name, of course, is Greek. Gallipoli, meaning beautiful city, and it is a beautiful city as well. So almost to sum up, we haven't really said anything about Puglian cuisine or food, but this is one of the real delights of visiting Puglia. I can't possibly go into all the differences of cuisine that you'll come across, but the famous dish in the Salento region at least is a type of pasta known as orecchiette. Orecchiette, which means literally little ears. You can see the shape of it. They look like little ears. And it has this sauce of what is known as cimeri rapa. Now, cimeri rapa, if you look it up in a dictionary, it will tell you that it is turnip tops. And I used to look at this dish of orecchiette with cimeri rapa, and I used to think that is not turnip tops. Well, it was only when I went to Puglia, you see this vegetable everywhere, cimeri rapa. It's actually a brassica, and it's more closely related to the broccoli family, if you like. And that's what it is, but it's delicious. And there's no way you can buy this same vegetable here, for example, in England. I'm sure not even in the United States. You can only get it in Puglia. And it's a great reason to go, is to just go and taste this. And of course, the fabulous Puglian wines, the Salento wines as well. You must have heard of the Primitivo wines, Primitivo grapes rather, but we should also mention other grape varieties such as Bombino, Trebbiano, and last but not least, of course, the Malvasia that we talked about when we were in Greece, which grows widely throughout Puglia. And just to finish off then, on our drive back to the airport at Bari, invariably we will pass through this fabulous little town, Polignano. Again, this is another one that sits on a slab of limestone, and it's just delightful to wander around here, buy an ice cream and just go around, enjoy the beautiful atmosphere, the sea air, and the beautiful skies and the gorgeous colors. I think Puglia is one of those areas where everybody just relaxes and has a really smashing and wonderful time. It's just one of those lovely, lovely places. It's really a place where you can unwind and have a nice holiday, as opposed to, for example, Calabria, where you kind of have to work a lot and travel long distances. So I hope one day you might all get a chance to visit Puglia and see some of these lovely things for yourself. But I'm going to end my talk there and open it up to some questions, comments, observations, if anybody has any. I'll ask Lara to unmute you. You can unmute yourselves.
You can.
Feel free to wave your hands, shout out loud.
Damien?
Yes, Rosemary, yes.
I was just going to say, Damien is surrounded by water, but we didn't see any holiday beaches. Is there an area that's special for holiday beaches?
Yes. That's, I'm afraid, Rosemary, that's a reflection of me.
Oh.
I'm not really a beach person. So when I go around, I don't really take pictures of beaches. But of course, yes, there are beautiful beaches, lovely sandy beaches. And also, I think it was in one of the photographs, and I didn't point it out. There are also some platforms off these rocky platforms, and you can dive off into the sea and so forth. So fabulous swimming as well, of course, because it's very clean. So thank you for reminding me of that, Rosemary. Yeah.
Damien.
Yes, who's that?
Hello, it's Jenny.
Jenny, yes.
Hello. I wanted to ask you, I was trying to write down the names of the two brothers who, when you mentioned at the very beginning.
Yes.
Robert.
Yes.
Guiscard.
So Robert
Yes.
Guiscard. So
Guiscard.
Guiscard.
Yeah, and they were the de Hauteville.
They were the Hauteville, yeah,
Yes.
Hauteville, yeah.
And the other brother, did I understand? You called him Roger, but then I heard you say Bossu. Did you say?
Yes, absolutely. So he was Roger. He was Count Roger.
Yes.
Also known as Roger the First, but he's also known as Roger Bosso.
Bosso, not Bossu.
No,
Because in French,
Bosso.
Bossu is a hunchback. I was wondering if I was hearing correctly.
No, it is Bosso.
Bosso, okay.
I don't know why he was called Bosso, though. I mean, it's not a surname or anything like that.
No. Okay.
So, for example, Guiscard, my French isn't up to it, but it means something to do with being wise, and there's something about being like a fox or something like that. I mean, he was a sort of a sly, cunning person. Yeah.
Yes,
Robert
okay.
Yeah.
And can I also just very quickly say, we love the orecchietti, and I can't pronounce it, Cime di Rapa, because it was about 3 weeks ago in the one of the journals we read, there was a recipe for it, and Peter persuaded me to buy some orecchietti, but we couldn't find any turnip tops.
But it did say you can use broccoli spears.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I thought you
That's
might be like to. So it was actually mentioned in one of the papers in England.
Oh, right.
There we
Damien, excuse me.
Terrific.
Jenny
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. Hazel, yes.
But Jenny could have used rapini. Could she not find rapini? Because that's very similar. Rapini, it's a very bitter type of a small broccoli, no?
Rapini, I don't think I know.
I'm not a cook, but I don't think we have that in
England.
England.
Here. Oh, okay.
Well, there you go. So you've got to go either to Puglia or Taranto. I think for some of us, Puglia is nearer.
And when is your tour to Puglia going to take place, Damien?
Well, yes. So we have 2 in the calendar next year. One in May. I have to say, I mean, it's all to do with vaccines and so on. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in May. The other one is in October, and I think there's every chance that one will certainly depart. And there is still a couple of places left on that, but only a couple. So you have to be quick. Chris, have you got a question?
Well, I was just going to have a comment, Damien, if I may. Yes. I don't know if this is true, but when we went to Albarabello and asked about why the trulleys were as they were, we were told that there was an eccentric aristocrat who owned that area in historical times who forbade the locals to use mortar, and that shape is the biggest you can build without it falling down. And if you want to close it off to make a roof, you have to build it to a certain height and then come across. And if they had another child and they needed a bit more room, they just built another one. So each one was not a house in its own right. You might have 4 or 5. A family lived in 4 or 5 or 6 of them, and if Granny came to live there, well, they built her another one, and they and that was why they were the shape they were. I don't know if that's true, but that's what we were told.
It's absolutely probable. I can quite believe that, and I mean, it is true. I mean, I didn't mention it, but the roof, you're absolutely right. The way the roofs are made, they're actually, it's a double skin. So underneath those, what are tiles on the outside, there is, as you rightly said, there is a stone structure. And as you pointed out, that's the easiest way of doing it, is to have a circular building and build upwards towards a cone. Yes. So that's the reason. You might well be right. Yes. Thank you.
Usually is.
Anybody else? Anyone?
Yes, Damien.
Kate, nice to see you.
On your tour, when you do Puglia, which I'm going to come one day when I'm fit enough, is on my list. But do you incorporate Matera?
That's a good question. That's a good question. The answer is
no.
No. The answer is yes. I think the question is, the point is actually that until this year and also next year actually, but next year will be the last time, we've been including Matera with Calabria, but it's actually quite a long way to go from Matera to Calabria. But as you saw on the map, Matera is much closer to, it's very close to Castel del Monte. So it is, in fact, we are planning to go to Matera. I don't know whether we are planning to stay in Matera yet. I don't think we are this coming October, but who knows, in a couple of years' time, by the time you come to travel with us, Kate, we might well do. So watch this space. We'll see how things evolve. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Hazel,
Damien,
yes. Hazel.
You didn't mention the flowers. It's full of bougainvillea, and I remember the roads down the south are lined with different coloured oleander. You go down to Santa Maria de Leuca at the bottom. It's absolutely fabulous, and such easy driving as well.
Absolutely. And actually, thank you, Hazel. Thank you, Hazel. Dare I say it, this is a terrible embarrassment here, but the reason why I didn't mention the flowers, or the reason why there are no flowers in my photographs, is because I've only ever been to Puglia in January and February. So in other words, so what time were you there, Hazel? What time of year?
We've been June, we've been July, and it was very hot.
Yes, yeah.
May, and each
Yes.
time it's been beautiful. The flowers have been beautiful.
So May is a good time to go. In other words, you suggest May as a good time.
I would say. And you can stand places like Locorotondo and look across the view. It's absolutely amazing. But I wouldn't want to do it in January, it has to be said. You get a lot of snow in Puglia.
Yes. Well, it was just my only free time, really. So, but thank you for that addition. Yes. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, Damien, the lady who asked about the beaches, all I can say is Kate here. It's Kate.
Kate, yes, Kate.
Yeah,
yep.
my Italian family had a fantastic holiday last year in a very classy resort at the very bottom. I can't remember the name. At the very bottom of the toe.
Santa Maria di Leuca, probably.
I've no idea. I can't remember. I wasn't invited, so. But I know that they had a fabulous time, and it was in the summer. It was very hot, but they loved it. Yeah, fabulous beaches, fabulous sea. Yeah.
Terrific, fantastic. Well, listen, I'm afraid we're going to stop very shortly. I'm afraid, because I do have to go at 8 o'clock. I'm going on a journey. I'm hoping to try and get back to Italy. Fingers crossed.
You've got a date, Damien. You've got a date.
No. Well, my only date is with the train to Gatwick. So I mustn't miss it. But what I do want to say before we just leave off, I want to say thank you all for joining us once again. It's been a lot of fun. Couple of notices, if I may. First of all, so we're going to take a break now, obviously, over Christmas and for New Year. We come back at the beginning of January. I can't just remember the date, but I'll send out an email. We've got 3 lectures left in this series: Georgia, Western Turkey, and Iran. Now, I deliberately left those lectures to the end. I'm quite aware that they're not on everybody's itinerary, perhaps to travel to, certainly not just yet. But do try and join us for the lectures, because historically they are utterly fascinating places, and they resonate very much with some of the things we've talked about and seen in the lectures up till now. So do stick with us, and as usual, if you miss the lectures, you'll be able to catch up with them on playback. And the final little notice, and I'm afraid this only really applies to those of you who are in the United Kingdom, because we can't ship it outside the United Kingdom, unfortunately. We have a wine tasting event on the 22nd of January. If you'd like to join us, we still have 3 or 4 places left. Get in touch with me. It's on the website. A little bit difficult to find, but I can point you in the direction. Get in touch, and there's still time to sign up, but I need to have the numbers finalized by next week. So if you are planning to join, don't leave it too late. And finally, I just want to say, I want to wish you all, on behalf of all of us, Lara, myself, all the guides in Sicily, Alice, Chiara, Irene, driver Carmelo, we'd like to wish you a really happy Christmas and all the very, very best for the new year and 2021. And goodness me, it's got to be better than this year, hasn't it? So just stay safe in the meantime.
Merry
Vaccines
Christmas.
are on the way. You're going to get them before us. So just a few more weeks, and fingers crossed we will all be safe. And
thank you so much, Damien, for doing these things.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year to everyone. Kate. Thank you, Rosemary. Thank you.